In our ongoing isolation, the extended Mackay family have continued our nightly gatherings for trivia. And earlier in the week we were asked the question, which thinker claimed that it is impossible to step into the same river twice? Which thinker claimed that it is impossible to step into the same river twice? And even though none of us could remember the answer, there was something about the question that was familiar to me. I was familiar with the idea. You see, stepping into a river is a metaphor for life, a metaphor for experience. Even when we go back to exactly the same spot on the bank of a river, and when we step into what we think is the same water we stepped into yesterday, or last week, or last year, we know, don't we? We know that that water is not the same water. It's not the same water that was flowing past in the past. New water has replaced the old, and the old has moved downstream. So even if we believe we're in the same place, the world has changed around us, so that our impression of being in the same place doing the same thing is merely an illusion. This idea, this image, is a metaphor then for all of life. And the argument, the philosophical argument goes that when we think we are doing the same thing, when we think we are having exactly the same experience that we had in the past, this is merely illusion. For time has passed and the world has changed around us. And since Heraclitus, who was the thinker we couldn't think of, since Heraclitus, this idea has intrigued and driven philosophers and physicists in their inquiries all the way to today. And for us armchair philosophers in 2020, stuck in our houses, feeling like every day is the same as the previous one, perhaps we should meditate on Heraclitus's wisdom and make sure that each day is a fulfilled and unique one. Because each day is indeed unique, and each day is a wonderful gift. There are a couple of things that annoy me about the way in which Christians speak about life and faith. Okay, actually, there are many things that annoy me, but let's keep it to two for today. And the first one is the false division that so many of us put up between the idea of the journey of faith and the destination of faith. Now, in certain circles, it has become immensely popular to talk about being on a journey, or on the way, or, and this one grates against me, journeying together in faith. And there is, of course, a lot of wisdom and truth in remembering that each day we travel and we change and we move and so on. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes I feel that in all the discussion of traveling, we have stopped thinking about the destination of our faith. We seem to be so focused on who we are when we're walking the life of faith, who we're walking with, and what the daily challenges of walking a life of faith are, that we forget that there is indeed a destination to the journey. There is a fulfillment and an overarching purpose to this journey. It is not simply an aimless wandering. We have a destination and we have a goal. And that destination and that goal is nothing less than the healing and rebirth of the whole cosmos. And it is that which shapes our work and guides our path. And we need to spend more time, I feel, remembering that. The second thing of many that annoys me is the passive-aggressive tension between those who want to claim loudly and proudly that Jesus is the answer and those, on the other hand, who are far more interested in finding out what the question was in the first place. And for many of us, the Jesus is the answer notion has become almost a bit of a joke. I know I always chuckled and sighed as I drove up to Maitland and passed the big billboard which had Jesus is the answer on it, just near the speed camera between Sandgate and Hexham. I don't know if you remember it. But it was up there for decades. And for decades, indeed, millions of drivers have passed this billboard. And for the vast majority, it made absolutely no difference in their life. No connection was made to their life, and no change was elicited either. And a minister friend of mine runs, which may not surprise you, an online gaming site. And the password to get onto that online gaming site to play games, the password is Jesus, all lowercase, because Jesus is always the answer. Of course, what's happening there is a wry joke at too simplistic a faith. But on the other side of the aisle, many of us so-called sophisticated Christians have sometimes become so lost in our questions that we have forgotten, at least for a moment, the clear answer that Jesus does indeed offer to many of the deep problems of life. So much so that there are theologians around who seem to want us to discard our Christology, to discard the thing that makes us distinctive and gives us our identity. And there are sometimes some good reasons for that. They want us to be more open to connecting with different people from different faiths, different backgrounds, and that's great. But I don't think we need to do that by discarding our Christology, discarding the fact that Jesus is indeed at the centre of our faith. The reading for today is a revelation of Jesus to his disciples. First, on the road to Emmaus, at least partially, then to a bunch of his followers gathered in a room in the village breaking bread, and finally through them to the 11, to the core group, the ones we would presume should have known the good news first. And in many ways, the whole telling is a retelling, a repetition of what has gone before. See, you remember all those times when Jesus told the disciples that he would be arrested, persecuted, betrayed, executed, and arise again? All those times he told them exactly what would happen, and they didn't believe him. Well, on the road to Emmaus, he tells them again. And even after the resurrection, they don't know how to believe him, for this is strange and wonderful information. They don't know how to believe until, of course, he breaks bread with them, just as he did so often, just as he did only a few days earlier on that fateful Thursday night. You see, in many ways, when we first read it, it looks as if the events on the road to Emmaus are just another repetition in what the disciples have experienced in the past. And though it might be on a different road and around a different table, when we first glance at this text, it seems that this is just more normal life, that today is no different, certainly no better than yesterday. But as the realization of the resurrection seeps in, everything takes on a new meaning and new colour, because the whole universe has indeed changed, and the way that Jesus is the answer has become clear. For not even the greatest of evils, not even the most powerful of foes, not even the overwhelming despair of death can defeat God's love for this world, which is embodied in Jesus. And so Jesus becomes both the destination and the answer for the disciples and for the world. And nothing can ever be the same. I love the way that as resurrection people, we Christians are called to see the normal or mundane things of life in a new way. We don't need to live lives that are completely different from everyone else in the world. We don't need to be super mystical. We don't need to sit on the top of mountains waiting for revelation. Instead, like the first disciples, we are called to travel from place to place, knowing that God is with us always. And we are called to share meals together with the deep and abiding sense that when we break bread together, we do so because of the goodness and generosity of God. And what this means is that when Christians travel, our journeys need never be so perilous that we cower in fear. And this also means that our meals together must always be filled with gratitude and joy. And so I hope that in our time of isolation, our experience will not be one where nothing changes and everything feels exactly the same, day in and day out. It need not be a major transformation, but I do pray that there will be some kind of transformation in each of our lives during this time. Perhaps we will spend our time talking to people we wouldn't usually talk to. Perhaps our prayer life will deepen. Perhaps we will experience community and the breaking of bread in a new and richer way when we're finally able to gather together. However we are changed at this time, let us all be transformed towards grace and away from fear, towards deeper and more meaningful lives, closer to the destination, which is God's end for us, and not towards fear. Not diminished in ourselves, not diminished in our call to welcome. There is indeed a risk at times like this that we will become a more fearful people, with permanently closed borders and permanently closed hearts. Indeed, on the road to Emmaus and beyond, the disciples could have become hard and fearful, but the resurrection forbids it. The resurrection forbids it. And so we, like them, are instead called to grace. We are called to grace. Amen.